A century and a quarter ago, a Russian playwright, Anton Chekhov, wrote the following about decent people. Decent people, he wrote, satisfy the following criteria. One, they respect human beings as individuals and therefore are always tolerant, gentle, courteous, and amenable. Two, they have compassion for other people. Their hearts suffer the pain of what is hidden to the naked eye. Three, they are not devious, for they fear lies as much as they fear fire. They don't tell lies even in the most trivial matters. Four, they don't run themselves down in order to provoke the sympathy of others. They are not vain. And finally, if they do possess talent, they value it. They take pride in it, and they know that they have a responsibility to exerting a civilizing influence on others. Our guest this morning epitomizes those words. Judge Desmond, like the great judge that I've spoken about many times in this class, Judge Henry Loomis, who was the author of The Trial Judge, which I've quoted many times. Judge Desmond has both served and excelled at virtually every level of the courts. He has come up through the ranks, and that, in my personal opinion, is where you'll find the greatest judges. He is respected by the bar and beloved by his colleagues. I've always thought of this expression as a truer statement than many, many others. I listened to this in the Academy Awards once, and it really, and this was about 30 years ago, and it rang through my mind, and has for decades. The great actor Cary Grant, you probably have never heard of him, upon winning an Oscar, once said in his acceptance speech that there is, quote, probably no greater honor can come to any person than the respect of one's colleagues. That so applies to Judge Desmond. He has served with distinction at every level of the court, as a colleague in the trenches with me in the Boston Municipal Court, as a colleague, a justice on the Superior Court, and then for 4 years, the last 4 years, as a justice on the Massachusetts Appeals Court. In the Boston Municipal Court, he took on a very difficult task, working as the presiding judge in a drug court. In my opinion, the most challenging court in the Commonwealth, the Dorchester Court. As the saying goes, or as one of my colleagues used to say, if you can work in the Dorchester Court, you can work anywhere in the Commonwealth. In addition to Judge Desmond's service on the bench, he served on the trial court's working group on race and ethnicity reporting. He also served as vice chair of the Supreme Judicial Court's Advisory Board on Probation and on its Judicial Performance Committee. But before that judicial career, he served as an assistant district attorney in Suffolk County for 7 years, and then as deputy chief legal counsel for the Middlesex County Sheriff. But most importantly, he is a son of Tufts, class of 1985. So please welcome Justice Kenneth Desmond.
Well, thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you kindly. And great to be here meeting with you. I know this has to be a little bit different for all of us, particularly you, probably not the campus life you envisioned when you expected to go off to college, but these are the things that make us stronger in the experiences that help inform our decisions when we go forward in life. So no matter how bad you got it, trust me, somebody has it worse. So you still have a lot to be thankful for. And I'm thankful to be here today. Don't know exactly what I can share with you. I'll tell you a little bit about my career path. and then try to answer any questions that you may have, and just kind of have a little discussion. It's good to be here. So as Judge Curran told you, I graduated from Tufts in 1985. When I got to Tufts in 1981, I was living in Barrington, Rhode Island. I came from Rhode Island. Before Rhode Island, I had lived in Summit, New Jersey, and before that, Westfield, Massachusetts, and originally from Malden, Massachusetts, which is where I live right now. I'm actually living in my grandmother's old house, so not too far from Tufts. When I went to Tufts in 1981, I was a bio-psych major. I played basketball at Tufts, and I expected to kind of be a sports doctor was my plan going into Tufts, because I wasn't good enough to play professional sports. So I thought maybe I had an interest in being an orthopedic surgeon. I'd be able to combine a couple of interests, sports and medicine, and maybe be a team doctor or something like that was kind of my vision. Until about my middle of my junior year, when I realized that some of my advanced chemistry classes were proving to be a little bit more time consuming and challenging than I had anticipated. I was working really hard to get, C pluses and B minuses, and I wasn't used to working really hard and getting C pluses and B minuses. And I figured there's got to be something else out there that must come a little easier for me. So in the middle of my junior year, I changed my major from bio-psych to political science. And I graduated with a political science degree in 3 semesters. So I was able to finish with my class. But at that point, I really didn't know what to do with a political science degree. I hadn't really thought too much about that. And a lot of my friends who were in the poli-sci major.
Was that me?
Were going off to law school, and offers one with IBM and one with
He crashed. Yeah. Okay. But it's nothing I can do, huh? No. Okay. Yes.
I would suggest that he's off.
He turned.
So don't know what's happened there.
No, we don't need it. August, your biggest fan, August Moore here, had a suggestion.
If it keeps happening, I would suggest turning off your camera. My guess is that it's a bandwidth problem.
Turn off my what?
Come up right here. Hold on one second.
Right. If it keeps being a problem, I would suggest turning off your camera. It might reduce the likelihood that it boots you.
Okay. Let's see how far we get. So got a couple of job offers, decided to take a job with New England Telephone. They had a 2-year corporate development program. And so I didn't know that I was going to really like it, but I figured, hey, it's only for 2 years. I'll learn. It was a first management job position. I would learn something about corporate America, learn about managing. And if I liked it, I would have an opportunity to stay on. And if I didn't like it, the experience and the training wouldn't hurt. And I'd be able to go off and do something else. Not quite sure what that was going to be. After about a year, I realized that wasn't really for me. And so I started thinking about what I might want to do following the 2-year program, and started looking at maybe going back to school. I started looking at business school. I was in business, I was in management. I thought maybe go to business school. Started looking at some of the curriculum for business school and realized that that didn't really interest me very much, kind of what I was looking to get away from. So I started looking at law school and was really intrigued by the programs and the classes that they offered. They had one course that they called torts. And essentially it was, what would a reasonably prudent person do in the same or similar circumstance? And I thought that was perfect for me. I'm a reasonably prudent person. There's really no right or wrong answers. You just have to kind of support your position and support your decision-making. And I thought that sounded interesting to me. So I applied to Harvard and I applied to Boston College Law School. I wasn't fortunate enough to get into Harvard. In fact, they didn't let me in as an undergrad either. At some point, I'm going to get my payback to Harvard. Haven't quite happened yet, but it's coming. And so I went to BC for law school. Didn't really know what to expect going to BC, quite truthfully. Wasn't sure that I was going to be a good fit for BC. It didn't strike me as very diverse. I was a local kid and just wasn't quite sure how I was going to get along there. But it turned out to be great. Credit to BC, because I really went in there with some reservations and came out of there with some lifelong friends and couldn't speak more dearly about Boston College Law School. So that was a great learning experience for me and a great time for me, and it really worked out well. Toward the end of my law school, I blew my knee out. I was still playing sports. I blew my knee out playing basketball in a winter league. And so I wasn't on campus for some of the on-campus recruiting that was going on. I went back to some of the summer jobs that I had and some of the internships that I had when I was in law school. I interned at a big firm in Boston. It's now called Wilmer Hale. It was Hale and Dorr at the time. I had worked at the Boston City corporate department, law department. And so I started just going back to some of those places to see if they had any jobs available and maybe they'd take me on. And in the course of doing that, the corporation counsel suggested that I go over to the district attorney's office. He thought that I'd be a great DA and go over to the DA's office in Suffolk County and apply for a job there and tell them that he sent me over. And so at the time, I didn't really know what DAs did a whole lot, I'll be honest. But I knew I needed a job that was going to pay me for being a lawyer. So I could tell my mom I was getting a paid lawyer now. I haven't gone for 3 years of law school. And went over to the DA's office and they were kind enough to give me a job. And so that worked out great. It really gave me an opportunity to learn how to be a trial attorney, which I ended up having a very passion for. And so it was just by chance and very fortuitous that I ended up there. And then I really enjoyed it. I started off in the appellate division in the district attorney's office before I moved out into the Roxbury District Court as a trial prosecutor, and had a great time in the district attorney's office. Was able to meet a lot of different people and be exposed to a lot of different things. And so that worked out great. After about 7 years, I had often been told, be careful not to pigeonhole yourself into one thing. So I didn't want to be pigeonholed as just a prosecutor. I started looking at some other opportunities and was very fortunate enough to get a job over at the Middlesex Sheriff's Department, which sounds a lot like criminal, but really is civil. Criminal, as I'm sure you know, your life, your liberties at stake. Civil really is about money damages. And so while a sheriff's department, you're housing detainees, sounds a lot of criminal, but really it's really civil litigation. They have a number of different unions that they negotiate with. They have a transportation department. They have a medical department. They have food services. And in the course of all of those things, you have litigation, whether it's transporting a prisoner from a jail to a courthouse and you get in an accident with a civilian, or whether it's because an inmate feels like they didn't get proper medical attention and they sue the sheriff, or a correction officer feels like they're being discriminated against, so they sue the sheriff. And so it was a good opportunity for me to get exposed to a lot of different areas in the civil litigation and to be in a lot of different forums and to meet a lot of different people. And I had a really good opportunity to hone my skills as a civil litigator. And in the course of that, I had friends telling me, Ken, you should really think about being a judge someday. And I said, I don't know. This is my professional friends. You don't really know what my personal life is when I'm out kind of running the streets a little bit. So I'm not really sure if the judicial thing was really for me. But along the way, I had more and more people suggest it to me. And so sometimes, we don't see ourselves the way others see us. And you have to kind of be open and receptive to that. And so I said, well, what the heck? I've had enough people encourage me to apply. And at the time, the judiciary was trying to diversify. We don't do a very good job with a diverse judiciary here in Massachusetts. And so I said, well, maybe there's a need. And so what's the worst that can happen? I'm not a judge now. The worst that they can do is tell me, no, I won't be a judge. I'd be no worse for the wear. And so I went ahead and I applied, and I got very, very, very close my first time. In fact, by all accounts, I thought I had the job. And then in the 11th hour, I didn't get the job. And the governor's legal counsel called me up to tell me that unfortunately I wasn't going to be selected. But he encouraged me to apply again. He said, some things changed, and I really thought you were going to be the pick, but you weren't. But don't be discouraged, and I encourage you to try again the next time around. And so I did that, and I was fortunate enough to get appointed as a Boston Municipal Court judge by the then Governor Mitt Romney. And so I did. I worked in the 7 years in the Boston Municipal Court, in a very busy urban court in Dorchester. As Judge Curran told you, I was able to sit in a drug court there for 5 years. I presided over a drug court there for 5 years, along with my other responsibilities in some of the other sessions. I also sat in a domestic violence court for a year while I was there. They had a 2-year special program for domestic violence, would only heard domestic violence cases. I sat in that for a year, and really felt like I was communicating with the community, and felt like I was really making a difference. And then Deval Patrick, who was the governor at the time, was trying to get some folks from the Boston Municipal Court and from the District Court to move up into the Superior Court. And they reached out and asked would I consider applying for the Superior Court. And so I said, it's not often that you get recruited to these things. And so I said, certainly I would apply to do that. And I did that, and I was fortunate enough to get picked, and went on to the Superior Court, where I worked for 4 years. I was encouraged to apply to the appeals court, and I did that. I need to step back just for a moment to tell you about my first meeting with Judge Curran, because when I first got onto the Boston Municipal Court, Judge Curran was already on the Boston Municipal Court. And at that time, we didn't have any new judge orientation. It was really kind of figure it out for yourself, show up at the courthouse, and just kind of find your way. And when I was able to sit in West Roxbury, is where I met Judge Curran, he was kind enough to really kind of put together his own new judge orientation for me. And he gave me materials, and he took me around to show me some of the different lunch spots around the various courthouses. And he didn't have to do any of those things. He didn't have to do any of those things. And he went out of his way to do that for me. And it was very meaningful to me. It really made me feel a part, and I'll never forget him for that. He was always been quite the gentleman. And even after I started going back, for a while, I was going back and forth to China as part of a judicial delegation, and teaching China law students and interacting with Chinese dignitaries. And then they would come to Massachusetts, and we would host them here in our courts. And a couple of times when I was hosting them in Dorchester, I would reach out to Judge Curran, because of course, when you're coming from afar, Harvard and Wellesley. And so they wanted to see what Harvard and Wellesley was like, particularly Wellesley, and Judge Curran lived in Wellesley. And so I would reach out to him and I would ask him, hey, would you mind hosting them a little bit for me and showing them Wellesley? And he certainly went above and beyond the call. He would pick them up at the train. He would drive them out to Wellesley. He brought them to his country club, which he didn't have to do. He took them to the Wellesley University, where they got to get some swag. And I think they talk more about their time with Judge Curran than they do about the Dorchester District Court. But that just shows you the kind of person he is. And he's the kind of guy who will do anything for you. He's just that type of a giving person. So a little shout out, special thanks to Judge Curran for doing that. It really made a difference in their lives, and was really meaningful to me that he would go far and beyond the call of duty to go out of his way to do that. And I thank him for it. So that's kind of my career to the appeals court. I recently applied for the Supreme Judicial Court, was in the running, got down to the final couple of candidates. Thought I had a good shot, and then the governor decided to go in a different direction. These things happen in life. That's part of politics. But if you never apply for anything, if you never dare to try to be successful because you're afraid of failure, you'll never get anywhere. You learn from those experiences. You put your best foot forward, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Chin up and move on to whatever is next. And so it was a great opportunity for me to try. I got down to the last couple of candidates, which I'm proud of. And although it didn't work out, I have no regrets. I'm certainly not bitter about it. He did appoint another diverse candidate. And so I think the Commonwealth's all the better for it. And just wasn't my time this time. A couple of times it's been my time, this time it wasn't. That's how life works sometimes. And so the measure of your character is how you respond when things don't go your way. You know, it's easy to be upstanding when everything's going your way. It's how do you respond when things don't go your way, I think is really the measure of your character. And so didn't go my way, but I still have plenty of work to do. There's plenty of work to be done. And I'll continue to try to contribute in any way I can. And I figure if God didn't have that for me, then maybe he's got something else in store for me. He certainly didn't bring me this far to leave me now. So I've got something else to do. And I look forward to kind of figuring out what that might be. In the meanwhile, I really enjoy my time on the appeals court. I don't know how much you know about the appeals court. It's a little bit different than the trial court. On the appeals court, we're on a court of review. So we're not hearing live witnesses. We're not doing jury work as I did in the district court and as I did in the superior court, but we're hearing from the lawyers. They're arguing legal errors or abuse of discretion on behalf of the trial court judges. We sit in panels of 3. And we hear all of the different cases from all of the different courts. So it could come from probate and family court, it could come from land court, it could come from district court, it could come from housing court, and we get to see all of those things. And so for that, it's fun because you really do get to have all different types of legal issues come before you. And it keeps you kind of on your toes and learning new law. And I like that part of it. And I like the part about having a vote on what direction perhaps our community is going to go. I like to have a say. And, you know, my father taught me at an early age that it's easy to stand on the sideline and criticize, but if you really want to make a difference in life, you have to get involved. You have to be willing to, you know, put your name in the ring and get involved. And so those are the things that I try to live by. A lot of my thoughts and views about judging are values that I've learned at home in the kitchen table growing up with my parents. And so I'm very grateful to them and the many life lessons that they taught me. They invested not only finances in me, but they invested a lot of time and training and values. And those are the things that I fall back on when I do my work. And so I've been very blessed in that regard. And I never forget where I came from. I know that I didn't get here on my own. A lot of things happened to fall my way. A lot of people helped me along the way. And so I feel like I have an obligation to give back and try to make it a little easier for those who follow me. And so those are some of the things that I try to do day to day. Being a judge is a wonderful job because every day you have an opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life. There's not a lot of jobs that you can say that about. And that doesn't mean that we do it every day. Nobody bats 1,000, but just having a chance at it every day, just having a shot at it every day is a real opportunity. And so I'm grateful for the kind of work that I do. I love my work. It's nice to be able to have the job you like going to. There's a real value in that. I've had jobs that I didn't love. I told you about my experience at the phone company, dreading Sunday because it meant I had to go to work on Monday. Always looking at the clock about when is this day going to be over. That's a horrible existence. And so being able to compare that to my work now, I'm really appreciative of the kind of things that I do now and the opportunities that have been given to me. And fortunately, I've been able to take advantage of a couple of them. I think Judge Curran said all those wonderful things about me. Those are very nice things, but we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all make missteps. That's gonna happen in life. You have to learn how to forgive yourself and move on and do better the next time. Don't make the same mistake twice. That's the important thing. So that's it in a nutshell. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say to you folks. I'm certainly happy to take any questions that you may have, or if Judge Curran wants me to talk about anything additionally, I'm happy to do that as well.
I'm sorry, I'm away from the mic. No, I'll just open it up to anybody on the Zoom. We've got, I don't know how many people on the Zoom screen, but by all means, I want to invite you folks as well. Don't feel like you're second class because you're not in the physically in the room. But any questions from those physically here and or on the screen? You're just blown away.
Did you face any particular difficulties as one of the only Black judges in Massachusetts and at the appellate court level?
That's a great question. I didn't. And I'll tell you, I think it's largely because in the course of my growing up, there were lots of times I was the only Black person in the environment. When I lived in Westfield, Massachusetts, we were the only Black family in the town. I was the only Black kid in my school. When I lived, my sister was the only Black kid, and she was a couple of years ahead of me. She was the only Black kid in her school. And so I learned how to, Malden is a lot like Medford, it's very diverse. And that's what I knew up until about 5th grade before we first started moving. My dad actually worked in a phone company too, so we were moving around as his career progressed. And so when I first got to Westfield, that was a very new experience for me. Being the only Black kid in an all-white school in an all-white town had its own challenges. Fortunately, I was an athlete, and athletes is the great equalizer. Athletics is the great equalizer. You can really make friends just about anywhere in sports. And so that made it a little easier for me to make friends and to find my way. Then when I moved from Westfield, Massachusetts to Summit, New Jersey, Summit was a little bit more urban. And now here I come from this only Black kid in Westfield, Massachusetts, to a city 45 minutes over the George Washington Bridge, fairly good-sized Black population, fairly good-sized Hispanic population. And I was kind of a country, kind of a bumpkin kind of a guy in Summit. And so that was a great experience for me too. Kind of learning how to get along. The kids were a little bit more city, a little bit more advanced than I was. And that had its own learning curve. From there, I went to Barrington, Rhode Island. Again, I was one of 3 Black kids in my high school, only Black kid in my class. Not to maybe 4 Black families in the town. And so I had been used to being in an environment where it wasn't very diverse. And so when I got to other environments like that, it didn't really strike me one way or the other. I feel like while I didn't know it, I was probably grooming and being groomed for some of my later career experiences and had no idea what I was being prepared for. And so when I got to the appeals court, and frankly, all the courts don't have the diverse numbers that we'd like. But I was always, I was able to make friends. I always worked hard. I was always prepared. That always helps a lot. If you come in and you do the job, sometimes people will forget what you look like because how good a job you might be doing. So, that means you have to work a little harder. Maybe you stay a little later. But, life's not always fair. And sometimes those are the things you have to do to get ahead and to advance. And so I was prepared to do those things. Had some experience about being the only minority person and was able to kind of fit into some of those other environments, even in work, without any incidents. Now, that's not to say I wasn't subject to some discrimination. I can remember one time going into a courtroom with my suit and tie and my briefcase and all ready, and the judge come out and look me over and look over the woman and say, okay, has anybody seen any of the lawyers? And you say, well, here I am, all prepared. I've got my suit and tie. And I said to the judge, well, what makes you think you don't see any of the lawyers in the room right now? And that was a teaching moment for that judge, because I think they didn't realize how they sounded. But I realized how they sounded, didn't like it. But I wasn't trying to humiliate them. I was just trying to show that that was a rude and ignorant thing to say. And you have to be careful when you make those kind of remarks. And, you know, the judge called me up to the bench. This was very, very early on in my career as a lawyer. Called me up to the bench afterwards and couldn't be more apologetic, and tried to explain, you know, what just took place. But we both know what happened. But that's going to happen sometimes in life. And so the key is how you respond to that. You know, you can get angry and start pounding your hand on the desk. And what do you mean there's no lawyers in it? Or you can make them think about what it is they just said. And maybe that will stay with that particular judge for a long time too. So I'm hopeful, as much as I tell the story, I hope that they tell that story as well, because I think it was a learning lesson for the both of us. I will say on the appeals court, it's collaborative judicial decision making. Like I said, we sit on panels of 3. So coming from a trial court where you're the only judge and, you know, you make all of the decisions, and if somebody's unhappy with your decision, you can kind of tell them, hey, the appeals courts, you know, in Boston, you can go appeal it there. On the appeals court, you have to work with 2 other judges and come to your decisions. And so you really have to learn how to have discussions. And sometimes those discussions can be very robust, I'll say. You have judges who don't always see eye to eye. I think judges by definition are probably very opinionated and don't mind sharing their opinion with each other or with whoever will listen. And so, you know, there's really an art to trying to discuss legal issues with other judges and maybe trying to persuade them to see it from your view. You know, I'm a public sector kid. I went to public schools my whole life. And I'll say that as much as you can get a quality education in the classroom, you learn a lot about life in the hallways. You learn a lot about how to get along with others in recess. There's a lot to be learned about how to get along, how to respect others, in the public school system. And I think a lot of those lessons also help inform a lot of my decision making now. You know, I understand that good people sometimes do bad things. Not everybody who's done something criminal is a bad person. Sometimes desperation or hopelessness will make people make choices that they might not otherwise make. And so before you judge somebody, you need to think a little bit about what opportunities they had or did not have. And if you were given their same set of circumstances, what would you do? How would you respond? Would you even be here today? So those are all things that I try to look at, because, you know, judging doesn't mean treat everybody the same. Judging means looking at a particular set of circumstances and facts, applying the law to those circumstances and facts, and trying to come out with what you think is the fairest and the most just decision. So it may very well be that I treat somebody who I know is a leader a little bit differently than I treat somebody who I can tell is strictly a follower and wouldn't be able to lead if life depended on it. I expect more from the leader and might treat them a little differently and maybe perhaps even a little more harsh than I would from somebody who's just a follower and knows no better.
Do you have a favorite area of the law?
Do I have a favorite area of the law? I have a passion for criminal law because I think that's really kind of where the rubber hits the road a lot in our work. When people get stopped for no reason. I know what it's like to be stopped for no reason. I know what it's like to be stopped in front of my house. I know what it's like to be stopped as a judge for no reason. These are experiences that I have. And so when kids and people tell me that that was their experience, it's not difficult for me to understand that. Some of my colleagues might say, oh, I can't believe that happened. Oh, there has to be more to the story. Well, I'm here to tell you, oftentimes there's not more to the story. And I know that because I've lived it. And so that's what makes for a good judiciary, that we bring our own different life experiences and we're able to share them with each other. My colleagues may receive something from me a little bit differently than they receive it from a defendant. And so that's all part of the education and the learning from each other that goes into judging. So I think the criminal law area is an area that I really like, but I've done a lot of med malpractice cases. I enjoy those. You learn a lot about whatever that issue is. Judges are learning a lot in the course of our trials. You know, the parties bring in experts, and they're not only teaching the jurors, but they're teaching the judges too. And I enjoy that quite a bit.
I had a question. So like, what is your opinion on, there's like, you know, this discourse in the US, but also, you know, around the world, regarding sort of like the justice system and whether it should be more punitive and sort of to get revenge versus something that is supposed to rehabilitate criminals. So what's your position on this discourse? I know like in Europe, places like Denmark are more focused on rehabilitation. They have a lot of programs in place to help people that have committed crimes sort of get back on track. Whereas maybe like a lot of states in the US, you know, they have a lot of things in place that prevent people that have been in jail from, you know, voting or maybe running for office and things like that.
Great question. So I told you, you know, my kind of approach to judging really stems a lot from the values that I learned growing up in my house. It's just me and my sister. And, you know, we learned a lot of lessons, like I said, at the kitchen table, a lot of tough love lessons, a lot of, hey, don't worry about what your sister got, you worry about what you're doing. So not always being treated the same. And so for me, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there should be a punitive side to our criminal justice system. I think that sometimes when people do bad things, they need to be held accountable for it. But you have to kind of look at what it is that they did. I don't think that necessarily every bad thing needs to be a life sentence that, you know, kind of keeps you from being able to go on and learn from it and do better, whether that's going back to voting or whether that's going on and trying to, you know, give back by way of your life experience as a misstep in maybe public office or whatever it is. So I think there has to be kind of a balancing act to that. I do believe that there has to be kind of a penal side, certainly to some conduct, but at the same time, I do think that it needs to be rehabilitative as well. So I try to bring a kind of a tough love approach. That's what I tried to do in the drug court, that no, you made some choices and they were bad choices and you have to be held accountable for those choices. But that doesn't necessarily mean you can't learn and do better and go on and do good things if given the opportunity. So I think there's a balancing that has to be done. Different judges may draw the line in different places, but that's kind of always been my approach to it. I don't think it should be strictly rehabilitative. Everybody just, hey, you made a bad mistake, now, you know, do better and go back out there. I think that some accountability is important, but depending on the level of crime, I don't necessarily feel like it should saddle you for the rest of your life.
Thank you.
Wow, a shy group. Where's Dan?
Harley, what do you have to say? You got your mute button on.
Hi, Judge. Thank you so much. So you said in the past that you had an interesting exchange with Chinese legal students who came to America. Did you learn anything interesting from that? And did they learn something interesting from you?
I sure hope they did. I sure hope so.
Harley, 1 second. Let me just interrupt. Harley, tell the judge where you're broadcasting from.
Oh, right now I'm in Taiwan, so not in the States.
Yeah, I've probably been to China half a dozen times on judicial delegations. And, you know, when I first had the opportunity to go to China, it wasn't with a judicial delegation, it was with a lawyers group. And there weren't enough Massachusetts lawyers who wanted to go. And so I ended up going with some lawyers from the California bar. And this was when I was a counsel for the Sheriff's Department. And when I was a young DA in Roxbury, there was a judge, Peter Anderson, who had gone back and forth to China. And I was always kind of intrigued about it, but wasn't quite sure I really wanted to go on my own. Didn't really know what that experience was going to be like. And so when I had this opportunity while working in the sheriff's office, I called Judge Anderson, who I probably hadn't spoken to in years, and asked him, I've got this chance, but I don't know. I mean, how are they going to receive a Black guy? How are they going to receive me? What do you think? And he said, definitely do it. Definitely do it. You should really go and see, and it'll be a fabulous experience for you. And so I did that, and it was a fabulous experience for me. We went to Beijing, we went to a Harley Davidson plant, we met with a law firm. It was really a great trip. So fast forward, and now I'm on the bench, and they're having these judicial delegations going back and forth to different parts of China. And so I raised my hand for that opportunity. I like to go and see the world. I think that's part of education. And so I don't know necessarily how I was going to be treated. And when I went with my judicial delegations, oftentimes I would, at the end of a busy day, put on some jeans and a sweatshirt and head out on my own, just to see how I was going to be received, kind of walking around by myself, not with the judicial delegation. I mean, the judicial delegations are fabulous. We're getting police escorts everywhere. We're getting top shelf restaurants. I mean, it was really a nice exchange. But I wanted to see what it was like kind of on the everyday experience. How were people going to treat me? And so I would take my hotel card that had a little map on how to get back to the hotel, and I would head out and just kind of walk around and sightsee on my own. And when I would get lost, I would just stop and ask anybody if they could take out my little card, point me back in this direction. And it was a fabulous experience for me. They treated me very warmly. You know, I went to the Great Wall of China, and the Great Wall of China is a fabulous, fabulous place to go. And you'll find that not only do a lot of foreigners go visit the Great Wall of China, but a lot of nationals go and visit the Great Wall of China. And so when I was there, oftentimes different people would come up to me with their cameras and say, you know, picture. And I would think, oh, sure, I'll take a picture, you know, take a picture of them. And then they'd say, no, they want to take a picture with me. So I've got to be on 100 different refrigerators across China with people I don't even know, because they were taking these pictures. That was the kind of reception that I was getting. And so it was really, really a fabulous experience. And I really tried to return that when they would come in and we would host them. And so taking them around to some restaurants and doing some of the other stuff aside from just the legal part of it is part of the experience. You know, it's that human interaction with people who may not look like you, who may not sound like you, but really at the end of the day want the same things that you want, which is, you know, to have an education, to be able to raise a family, to be able to give your kids nice things. Those are the things that we all have in common, and those type of experiences really teach you that and give you an opportunity to see it up close and personal. So I hope that they had a great experience visiting us as I did visiting them. I really tried to make it a good experience and tried to show them things that they find fun and entertaining. And because that's the way that they treated me when I was there. And I think I'm all the better for it, and was very appreciative of it. So it was a fabulous experience. You know, you go to Beijing, Shanghai, you close your eyes, you'll think you're in Manhattan. I mean, some of these streets are like Fifth Avenue. I mean, just high-end hotels, fancy cars, high-end shopping. It was just different for me. And then you can go out to the rural period, and it's a peasant lifestyle. I mean, it's very, very different. probably a lot like America in some areas. So it was a fabulous experience for me. I really enjoyed going back and forth. It was great.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit more about when you worked in the drug court and what you learned there and kind of what you did?
So sure, the drug court was interesting because I kind of just ended up in the drug court. One of the judges who started the drug court used to be a Boston Municipal Court judge, Judge Zimian, and he sat in Dorchester. And then he left Dorchester and he went to South Boston. And so we had started this drug court program in Dorchester, but none of the judges there were really raising their hands to go sit in that particular session. At the time, there were probably 4 or 5 different judges who were sitting in Dorchester at the time. So, so I said that I would do it. And what I found interesting about the drug court program is that you really have to make the program suited for you as a judge. So the way I might run a drug court program might be different than the way another judge runs a drug court program, because in order to be genuine with the defendants, you have to be yourself. It has to be your personality. You can't be trying to do something out of a playbook, because I don't think that that's going to be received very well. You have to keep in mind that folks who have addiction in the drug courts, they're savvy. Just because they're addiction doesn't mean they're stupid. They're savvy, they're smart. Some of them, if only they had better opportunities, could be sitting in some of these classrooms that you guys are sharing. No question in my mind. And so you really have to be very genuine and let them know that you care about them, and I did. But I wasn't going to be, they weren't going to be able to hustle me because I'm a public sector guy. And so I kind of met them in a place that they knew and I knew. And so we were able to get along. And it was a little tough love. I changed a couple of things in the drug court program. I started a dress code for my drug court. You had to wear, the guys had to wear a shirt and tie. If you didn't have one, I'd provide one for you. In China, you can get silk ties for $1 a piece. Every time I'd go to China, I'd probably come back with 50 silk ties. You can get women's silk shawls for like $1 a piece, $2 a piece. I'd come back with 20 of those. And so if you didn't have it, I would have asked the court officers to bring in old shirts, old ties. We would have a clean shirt and a clean tie for you if you didn't have your own. And for the women, you had to dress appropriately. And that didn't mean you had to be fancy. I mean, I understand that a lot of folks didn't have means. I get that. So it didn't have to be super fancy, but it had to be clean and it had to be appropriate. And if you didn't have it, we would help provide it for you. But just by them changing their appearance, they were treated differently. Just because somebody had a shirt and tie on, now somebody's holding the door for them, and they may have never experienced somebody holding the door for them. And so they start to say, wow, I kind of like the way that feels. They start to feel better about themselves. That's all part of it. Sometimes, you turn to drugs. Sometimes it's for self-medication. Sometimes it's because you want to hang out with your older brothers. You have bad influences on you. Any number of reasons. Sometimes it's because you may have a mental health issue. You don't like hearing voices, so you try to self-medicate. Mental health is not a popular thing in urban environments. Nobody's going around telling everybody, hey, I hear these voices, and it really makes me crazy. They're trying to cover that up to all extent possible. Not a good thing. And so we try to talk about those things out loud. There's no shame in having a mental health issue. There's zero shame in it. I'm sure everybody in this room knows somebody, if they don't themselves have some type of issue. So the more we talk about that, the more we get rid of those stigmas that are attached to that. And there's no shame in having a drug addiction. Nobody raises their hand and says, hey, I'm setting out to be a drug addict. That's not how it works. And if they had their choice, I'm sure many of them would prefer not to be. But once you are, it's a very, very difficult thing to break. And so you can't do it on your own. It starts with some want to. In my drug court program, there was a time where before I got there, the judges could kind of sentence you to drug court. I changed that. I said, you know, you're not going to be sentenced to drug court. You have to raise your hand and tell me why you want to be in drug court. You have to write me a letter and explain to me why you want to be in drug court. Because I'm going to do everything I can do to help save your life, but I shouldn't be working harder than you at saving your life. And so we got to work together. And I'll commit to you that I'm going to do all that I can, but I expect a lot from you too. And as I said before, nobody bats 1,000. I know there are going to be missteps, but I don't tell them that, because if I tell them I expect you to have a misstep, that hustle mindset is going to say, oh, that means I get one for free. No, I'm not telling you that. And so it was kind of a tough love approach, but it's very rewarding when you see people who graduate from drug court who may have never graduated from anything before in their life, and their parents or their loved ones get to come to a ceremony. We'd have a ceremony for them, and everybody would come into the courtroom. All the other court personnel would come, and they'd get to say a few words, and we'd have a little luncheon for them. And it was really quite a little time for them. They've never experienced anything like that. So, you know, a lot of what's going on in the courtroom is, yes, we're trying to change people's behavior. But at the same time, we're trying to uplift spirits. We're trying to expose people to different things that they may have never experienced before. And like I said, it didn't work for everybody. There are some people that continue to stay in a life of crime, didn't work, and I'd have to sentence them to jail or whatever. And hopefully, in doing that, I know there's many a time that they were angry at me leaving the courtroom. But I got broad shoulders and I can take that. And so you can be angry at me right now. I do it because I care for you and I'm trying to save your life. And you may not appreciate that or be able to receive that right now. But oftentimes, or several times, I've had people come back to me a month, 2 months, a year later and say, wow, Judge, you really did save my life by that. And I hated you for a long time, but you know, I got to thinking about those things that you said as I was leaving that courtroom, and I really appreciated what you did for me. And so those are the things that we like to hear as judges. Those are the things that no paycheck is going to be able to make you feel that good when you have that type of an experience. So that's what we're about. You know, when you're judging, when you're working in the legal career, the legal system, you know, we're not making widgets. This is a human enterprise. And I think that you always have to keep that in mind in everything we do. You know, we get used to sitting in the courtroom. It becomes our office. We do it every day. But for many people, that might be their only opportunity, their only time in a courtroom. They've been up for a couple of weeks thinking about, oh, I've got to go to court. They've had sleepless nights. They've been talking about with their friends. That's their only experience. And so we can't lose sight of that and have to be cognizant of it as they come into that courtroom every day, because that may be their only experience. And so we want them to feel like they were heard, even if it doesn't go their way all the time.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the Zoom? Don't be so shy. All right. You were Dan?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a question. Can you hear me, Judge?
I can.
Oh, good. It seems like you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like being a judge, being a lawyer was not your plan. And I also do not really have a plan right now. And I'm wondering if you have any advice or something. It's reassuring to see someone as successful as you was once in my shoes. And I'm wondering if there's any advice you would give to your 20-year-old self.
I have a lot of advice I'd give my 20-year-old self. I think I had a lot of breaks fall my way, I'll tell you. My 20-year-old self would never in their wildest dreams think of being sitting where I'm sitting right now. So I probably would have done a few things differently back then. Maybe it was because I was immature. I mean, I was chasing women and playing sports, and that was kind of what I was doing, you know. School kind of came, I won't say came easy, but came a little bit easy for me. So I didn't really try real hard at it a lot of times. And I know that if I had really applied myself, I could have really done differently, and maybe Harvard would have had me. So it's really probably not Harvard's fault, but I'm still going to have some words for them at some point. But I would say that, you know, sometimes, and I alluded to this earlier, sometimes others see us in a way that we don't see ourselves. And I think you have to kind of be receptive to that, because you don't really know where you're going to be. Even, you know, the best laid out plan is going to change sometimes. So I think whatever you do, it starts with being a good person. You know, it starts with, you know, being a good person. I really think that makes a lot of difference. If you're a nice person, people will want to help you, will want to give you an opportunity, will want to give you a break. If you're a jerk, people aren't going to go out of their way to do those kind of things for you. You know, the best way to get a good job is to do a good job at the one you got. If you do a good job at the job you have, people will take notice of that. And they'll say, oh, wow, I just heard about this other opportunity. I think you'd be great for it. And so that's how opportunities come your way. And then, of course, you have to be willing and daring enough to step out and try it, even though you may have never seen yourself in that role, because that's all part of the learning experience. And so you have to be willing to kind of step out on faith sometimes and see how it goes, and not be afraid of failing. There's something to be learned in failing, even if it's not to do that again. So my 20-year-old self would say, well, you know, you probably could have applied yourself a little bit more than you did. You're very fortunate to get some of the breaks that you got. I realized that it wasn't just about hard work, that I had a lot of breaks go my way. And I realized that, and I was fortunate enough to kind of make the most of them. And so I say, you know, kind of go after whatever your dream is, set your sight on whatever it is you think you may want to do, but understand that you may change paths and you may change along the way, but that's okay. That's okay also. That's all part of growing up and all part of the process. So try to embrace those opportunities and make the most of them. And I think you'll be fine. Nobody expects you at 20 years old to know what you're going to do with your life.
So true.
Thank you.
Isn't that true? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else on the Zoom? Let me just take a look quickly on the. All right. Judge, thank you very much. I guess one piece of advice, Dan, that Judge Desmond could share with you is don't take a job with the telephone company.
No, I'm not even going to say that. I mean, the phone company was a great job. It just wasn't for me. And so, you know, I learned that by having taken on that experience. I learned some things while I was there, but it just wasn't something that I wanted to do. But it was a great 2-year program. The first year was my first management job. It was a continuum of kind of classroom training and some on-the-job stuff. And then the second year was mostly on-the-job stuff. And so I learned from that experience. It wasn't for me, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be for somebody else. It just wasn't a good fit for me. So I don't poo-poo the phone company. They treated me fairly, and they certainly paid me well, and I was young. And so I certainly got paid handsomely at the time for a young kid coming out of college. And so I have no negative feelings. It just wasn't a good fit for me. That's going to happen sometimes in life.
And you know, one of the things, Judge, that I've learned is even those jobs that I didn't care for, or tasks or experiences that I had, I learned from each one of those, maybe that's something that I don't want to do. And that's just as important as learning what you do want to do.
That's exactly right, I think, Judge.
That's so true.